Thank you, Ruti. Shalom, Chaverim. Shalom lekulam. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I would like to thank the MFA and also INSS for this timely debate. And I'm pleased to join you from Brussels. I can only imagine what you have been going through since the 7th of October, as we have seen also unfolding in front of our eyes incredible forms of anti-Semitism here in Europe. This has impacted significantly on the Jewish communities here, and I will be addressing briefly the situation for the Jews here in Europe, and also what we at the European Commission, at the European Union, are doing to address this situation. You will not be surprised that we have seen a significant rise of anti-Semitic content on all social media platforms, the moderated one, but in particular also those without moderation. On X, for example, anti-Semitic content was up 919% in the week after the 7th of October. And the hashtag Hitler was right increased by 1,600% the day after the heinous Hamas attacks. As we all know, the road from hate speech to hate crime is very short, and so we have not witnessed such mobilization of anti-Semitic hatred on the streets and extremism, including through demonstrations that glorified the terror of Hamas and glorified also the Holocaust since the founding of the European Union. We have seen anti-Semitic acts increase, so really attacks against Jews or against premises, Jewish premises, in Germany, 320%, in Austria, 300%, in the Netherlands, 800%. In France, we saw 1,700 acts that were recorded in the first 5 weeks after the attack, and that is opposed to 436 acts in the whole of 2022. So the situation is very severe and has an incredible impact on the Jewish community. We see the harassment of Jews, and Deborah, who's a dear colleague, and much of what I will be saying actually aligns very much to what she just mentioned in the wider global context. We have seen harassment of Jews on university campuses. We see Molotov cocktails thrown into synagogues, Stars of David sprayed on houses. The incidents really remind us of the darkest time in history of Europe. What is different now is that this time national governments and also the European Union are on the side of the Jewish community. This is done with a clarity that could not be more apparent. The Jewish community lives in fear. We have to acknowledge this, and we have to act. And the ultimate aim and the heart really of the European Union strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life that we adopted in 2021 has at its very heart the idea of fostering Jewish life, of ensuring that Jewish life can flourish in Europe. And as we see at the moment that Jews are retracting and that they are taking off symbols, wearing Stars of David, or take off their kippot, as they are taking their mezuzahs off their doors or changing their names on doorbells, we are using all the instruments we have to act and to ensure that Jews in Europe can be safe and can see a future for themselves and for their children in Europe. One important aspect of this is to side with the Jewish community publicly and to also celebrate with them. And Hanukkah was a very good occasion for this. President von der Leyen herself, she went to ignite the big menorah, giant menorah that is in the heart of the European Quarter in Brussels on Sunday. We celebrated Hanukkah with Commission staff, Jewish and non-Jewish staff, together with Commissioner Vaheli, who is responsible for neighborhood policy. This was also in the context of a dialogue and diversity initiative, which brings together Jews and Muslims. And as you can imagine, this has also been challenging in the last weeks, but we do want to progress in this area. Commissioner Jourova, who is responsible for the defense of democracy within the European Commission, went to see the European Union of Jewish Students for their 45th anniversary, also last weekend. So we have used these occasions. Myself, I spoke at the big demonstration that took place in Brussels against anti-Semitism on Sunday. We think it is important to be very clear that Europe sides with the Jewish community and that we will use also our policies in order to ensure what we can do with all the instruments to roll back anti-Semitism. One important aspect, we know, as I said in the beginning, social media is the #1 entry point into our living rooms for anti-Semitism. We have in Europe the Digital Services Act, which is the first legal framework of any region in the world to regulate actions of the platforms. It obliges them in particular to assess the risk of their action for society and to present the European Commission with plans how to mitigate these risks. They can use their different tools, for example, the algorithms, but they have to present us with concrete plans. And in view of the explosion of illegal content that we saw in the days after the attacks, Commissioner Thierry Breton, who is responsible for internal market, on the 10th of October wrote to several of the big platforms and reminding them of their duties to ensure that their platforms do not spread illegal content. And he reminded them also that in case of non-compliance, they can be fined, according to this legislation, up to 6% of their annual turnover. So on the European Commission side, everybody is mobilized as we see the challenges that the Jewish community is facing. We are also, for example, creating a network of trusted flaggers that will identify anti-Semitic content in all EU languages, but also in non-EU languages. And we already just heard also from Deborah that increasingly from non-EU countries, anti-Semitism is utilized to destabilize the EU, and this also needs addressing. A prerequisite for Jewish life is the security of Jewish communities, and so we are increasing funding to ensure the security of Jewish premises, together with the member states. And I want to be very clear that this is not limited to the European Commission. Governments and national actors have been very strong in ensuring and in responding to the anti-Semitic upsurge that we have seen. But, and that also was already mentioned by Deborah, the rise of anti-Semitism, of course, targets above all the Jews. It threatens their security, it threatens their community life, their right to assembly freely, their right to education, their cultural traditions. And that in itself would be sufficient to address it. But we see with this rise of extremism that we have seen also erupt on European streets, that it is a threat to democracy and to public security. And more we are integrating the work of the prevention of radicalization and the prevention of extremism with the work to address anti-Semitism. The recently foiled attacks against Jews and Israeli targets, for example, in Cyprus, in Vienna, in Berlin, show that anti-Semitism is not only a question of discrimination or of racism, but it threatens security and societal cohesion, really. It puts into question democratic values of equality and the respect for the individual, really the European way of life as we see it and as we have built it since the Second World War. Unfortunately, this rise of extremism has also targeted other groups. In particular, we see heightened anti-Muslim hatred, and there is a colleague of mine who is responsible for addressing anti-Muslim hatred in that sense. We have also put forward, as a matter of urgency, a communication which is entitled "No Place for Hate, a Europe United Against Hatred," and it calls on all Europeans, so state actors as well as civil society actors, the media, religious actors, the cultural sector, academia, where we have seen significant rise in particular and harassment and threats of Jews on campuses, to stand up and to speak up against hatred and for the respect of the individual, because we see this is essential obviously for Jewish life, but it is also essential for Europe as a whole. Dear friends, as it is often the case in such tremendous crises as we are seeing them at the moment, it is also an opportunity to move forward, to integrate our policies, to align our policies, to build bridges in a way that probably they would not have been possible in the same speed. And so we are using this situation also to make sure that we address anti-Semitism and the security question, the threat to democracy, in a wider and concerted way together with the EU member states. I wish you a very meaningful lighting of the 8th candle of Hanukkah tonight, and I look forward to the debate. Thank you very much.